In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is that time. It is the midnight hour. It is time for Ghost. Tonight, we have a special treat for you. Tonight, we're going to start, and we'll actually continue with our series on haunted and cursed objects and attached objects. But tonight, we have a two-part series. And this series is written by Eric Knight, our IT manager, and he did a great job. And there's so much on this, and it is on Haunted Dolls, Part 1 and 2. So, with me tonight is Sierra Medley, our research manager and podcast producer.
Hello.
Heather Lawson, our case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
And Eric Knight, our our IT manager.
Good evening and greetings.
And our podcast writer, really, for tonight. So, I mean, he assists with social media. I mean, we all have many titles. Yep. I mean, it comes with this program. So
many hats.
Yeah, yep. So many hats to whatever needs to get done. So I tell you what, I'm going to turn this over to Eric and let him open this up and get it running, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you. It's fascinating. This group has opened my mind to so many possibilities. I was just focused on ghosts and hauntings like that, but I never really thought about some of these other things. And Chief had asked me to look at haunted dolls, and I'm like, oh, great. Dolls are like my nemesis. I've naturally always hated dolls.
Poltergeist?
Oh my God. Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know. But growing up, my mom
Did you see that movie with the clown?
Yeah. I grew up in this house, and we had this room full of dolls, and they were ancient and antique, and it just creeped the hell out of me. So then Chief goes, well, why don't you do something on haunted dolls? And I'm like, oh gosh. So here's something I've noticed. It's across cultures, across centuries, geography.
Yeah.
You go across so many spans where humans did not have contact with each other. And so there's stories, and dolls in particular, humans have created these objects that look like us. They're not animals, not monsters, but us.
Yeah.
And almost everywhere in the world, there's stories of haunted dolls, and I was fascinated because you have the classic Annabelle, and we'll talk about Annabelle later. But I had no idea there's so many others. In Australia, Canada, all of them have had these stories of dolls, and it was so fascinating to look into.
I got to say one thing. You were talking about dolls when you grew up. I had a doll that was a gift to my half brother, and they called it Clowny, and it was a clown doll.
Oh, clowns!
Oh yeah. I mean, and it had, get this, gets better. It had a face mask, and you could change it from smiling to grimacing.
Nope.
And my dad, I keep taking it out of the room, going, look, it isn't mine. I don't want it in my room. It wasn't. I just didn't like the look of it. It was creepy at night. You go to bed, and you could tell it was staring at the bed. It still hangs on the wall at my mother's place. Last I saw it was still there. It's probably a good 60, 70-year-old doll.
Nope.
And yeah, I mean, I know, being a Shriner, I know a ton of the Mirage Shrine clowns. I love them to death, but I don't trust them anywhere behind me without observation. But anyway, the doll thing is, I don't think that's not unusual. people, they either love them or they don't.
Mm-hmm.
My mother collected, what was it, Madam Walker? No, I don't know. Yeah, I think, which is expensive.
She was
doll.
a cosmetic.
That's right. She's a cosmetic.
Empire
Madame Tussauds had the wax museum as a Madame something a doll, and she collected those. And you know, I think that when you look in a doll's eyes, you know, I don't know whether it's the early horror shows we watch or something that does that, but I agree, you know.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing is, why are dolls so different? I mean, you have this historical, cultural, psychological reasons. All these human-shaped objects have always unsettled us. At least me. Intrinsically, I've always been scared of them.
How did you do in the Randolph room?
Oh,
there?
That's what I was thinking.
We were going to get there.
I was going to ask.
That room. If you notice in the videos or the evidence review, I stayed out of that room. I did not go.
It was creepy.
Yes.
I think I messed with Andrew a little on that one because he looked at me and says, "Did that one doll move?" I go, "Which doll?"
Yeah.
He pointed. I said, "No, it was one next to it." And he looked at me and I go, I don't know. And you know, I didn't see it, but it was just funny because this room had a ton of dolls. They were on shelves 3 and 4 high. I mean, this whole room must have had, what, 50 dolls?
It was loaded.
It had a bunch.
Yeah. So it was kind of rough. It was where other people didn't mind the mirror room. I think that must have been your...
Your
kryptonite. Yeah.
Yep. So apparently there's even a term for this that I have. It's called an uncanny valley, and it's.
We just watched a video on that the other day.
Yeah, we did. We watched that. Yeah, we watched that. Unfortunately, a lot of people want to know what I do. I watch a lot of documentaries and things. That's just the way me and Heather always does.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's describes the discomfort we feel when something almost looks alive but isn't.
Yeah.
And that's these dolls. I mean, I don't know where
I had an uncle that was that way.
I don't know where
Yeah, we were watching. It was on robots. Androids.
Yeah, it talked about the new ones Japanese have come out with in Chinese and all these new, you know.
Oh my god.
And it talked about that. And some of them are pretty close to iRobot out there. I mean, we're dealing with
Optimus.
Oh yeah.
They're starting to reconfigure Tesla factories to start building Optimus.
Oh yeah.
No thanks.
You know, she hates one of the ones I went through for a long time. I watched the Dotloff Pass episodes, and they even made a movie. I covered it all. I got everybody's opinion. Drove her absolutely nuts. But that was almost as bad as the chainsaw sharpening.
It shows up on our search history a lot. Still.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Force of habit.
Well, anyways, I guess there's a lot of psychology and study around this. Even anthropologists at institutions like the Smithsonian document that early dolls were not toys. They were fertility symbols, teaching tools, burial objects, ritual stand-ins for people who were absent, dead, or unborn. So we are imparting our essence into these objects.
Sure.
And I think
like a voodoo doll.
And you know, we'll talk about voodoo dolls, but I think we're imparting our energy into these and we give them life. I really do think there is something in the parapsychology of, you know, you talk about hormonal teenagers creating poltergeist activity and such. I wonder if that's kind of the same thing with these dolls is there's intense energy. They're substitutions for missing relationships. I know, you know, it used to be my mom talked about her dolls and stuff, and she was a very lonely child. Her father was away in World War II. Her mom, you know, was working, trying to take care of the family here in the States. She had a little sister. So she didn't really have anyone. And so she created dolls. Yeah. Like she make her own dolls. And so that was her
it's kind of like imaginary friends. I mean, a lot of us had imaginary friends, you know, and I think that imparts some of that there. You know, it's that need to have friendship.
And then you got those reborn dolls.
What?
Oh, those are creepy.
Yeah, those are real creepy. You haven't seen those?
No.
Okay.
Now, tell me about the reborn dolls, dear.
They're baby dolls that look like babies.
Like real babies?
Like real babies. And if you get the really good expensive ones, they're silicone skin, so they feel and they're water filled.
Except they're dead. Ooh,
Well, they were never alive, right?
I know, but
yeah, that's at least what the package said. Yeah,
they're gel and water filled like a silicone implant.
Nope.
So they warm up while you hold them.
And I would be remiss if I didn't go into
and they're squishy too.
The sex dolls.
No.
Oh God, they got some that are $2,000, and I always swore up and down that Ed Adams, our late retired co-founder, had one. I mean, I swear to God. they have a lot of working parts. And they don't take batteries.
I did not do any research on those. I didn't even think of that.
Well, I remember, what was it? We watched a show one time, and this guy ordered this one. And this, back then it was one of the porn stars. She had her body casted for this doll, and so they had to put, when they did her breasts, she had to lay for so long and let this cement or something stuff. Then they made a mold, and they poured the mold, and I don't know how much they paid her for it, but anyway, these dolls were like, back then, were $2,000, and I think they're around $700-800 now, last I heard. But I mean, they look realistic. You think I'm just painting a picture here. You think where the robots like Optimus and some of these are going, you add that imagery with AI controlling conversations. Alexa, and I should have probably muted her. Anyway.
Yes, she lit up over there.
Oh, yeah. Cancel. Now that the AI is installed, she likes to have meaningful conversations in the morning. And I'm getting coffee. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to know what the damn temperature is outside. I don't give a shit about any of the other stuff. I just want the temperature, and that's it.
Oh.
And then she'll ask me, she wants to know if I want my schedule. No, I haven't drank coffee yet. I don't, and it's funny, but we're getting to the point that you take AI and you put it into the dolls. Think about that for a minute.
That just seems
scary.
It's disheartening because
that's where the uncanny valley comes in.
We have dehumanized ourselves already. I mean, we are so at each other's throats politically, all this, and now we're going to introduce a substitute for human interaction. And something as with intimacy, that just seems like destruction of humanity.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, they've got robots now. I know New York police are using them. New York City police, I think Chicago is, and they use them in large crowds. And what they do is they determine they can actually scan for weapons and different things. They look like to me, they look like a kiosk on wheels. I mean, they're not anything. It doesn't look like RoboCop, I'll tell you that. But they claim because of their look, they're less aggressive. And they go out and they will ask people to move back and everything else. And I just,
Have you seen Boston Robotics?
Oh,
their dog?
Yeah.
See, no, that thing is creepy as hell.
Oh, they had a guy that was on YouTube that was using it to guard, I think he's growing marijuana, but he's guarding the fields and had it using it to guard the fields, and someone shot it. We've been looking at this after the tractor deal. It's not that I was mad at John Deere, but hey, if John Deere wants to sponsor us, I wouldn't matter. I'm sure they don't want to sponsor a paranormal show, but we've been looking at this Yarborough robot, and it clears snow, it mows, and it's also $7,000 for all the attachments. But,
I have seen that.
Oh, but it works. And I mean, we watched it clear a foot of snow, and it was just going up and down this guy's drive. You can adjust it for gravel, but we got reading, we got researching. We thought maybe in the future.
Got a guard mode.
Yeah. It'll go out and patrol the property. You can set it up every hour or something to run through the property, and it will detect people. And it can detect them as much as 20 feet off. And, we sat there and thought about it and thought, well, maybe. I mean,
Do they have a wood chipper attachment?
Nope. But I imagine give them time. It does. It has a plow blade, a snow blower, a mower. It has a broadcast spreader. It had a blower attachment, so it could blow the driveway. Of course, what it doesn't tell you is it doesn't detach from the detachments and reattach. You have to do that manually.
Oh, wow.
But still, it isn't that bad. And I mean, there was another guy that ran a bunch of credit apps, and he had the earlier model of the lawnmower, and people kept stealing it. He'd have to go GPS it. He had it with a chip on it so he could track it down. But that alone, you got basically an outdoor maintenance man that runs on a battery and recharges itself, and it can run up to 4 hours any given time, clearing snow, mowing, whatever. And they're getting more attachments. They've got a boom sprayer attachment coming out. They do have a weed eater attachment for it. I mean, you turn this thing loose, and then it patrols your property.
Well, that's why I'm thinking the wood chipper feature.
Yeah,
it's self-defense. So.
Oh God, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Might have to override some programming, but yeah. But the Boston Dynamic dog, they are selling that. You can buy that homeowner version for patrolling, and I think it's $2,000 is what they're doing with it. Oh. But what was the Boston Dynamic, the one that they taught to dance and they would go and try to, when they did demonstration, they try to knock it off balance and everything. And they had a video. It upset a lot of people. It was a joke video, and they've got shotguns. They keep stepping in front of it because it knows not to shoot a human. And at one point, they did something. They kicked the dog, and it made it mad. It took the shotgun and punched one of the guys in the stomach with a butt, grabbed the dog, and just jumped over a cliff and kept going. They still got it. It's on YouTube. And everybody goes, oh, my God. They go, look, that was a joke video. We did that on purpose. It doesn't do that, but they trained it to work a 12-gauge pump. And, the military's had robots for quite some time that operate firearms. But, and I know we got a little bit off dolls, but it really is one and the same.
It's just
Are they not dolls?
Yeah, they are. Well, it's an evolution. I mean, you had the simplistic dolls. You talk about voodoo dolls and what their purpose was, religion. The Hollywood thing is, the pins and stuff. That's
sure.
I think that's just Hollywood. But we've used these dolls for stand-ins and for ceremonies. Now we're just using them for gardening and maintenance, and it's a natural evolution. Now I'm just sitting here.
Well, think about the scarecrow.
Yeah.
Now there's a scary one right there. That's a doll.
Yep.
Used to scare. And of course, how many horror stories have been evolved out of that?
No.
Just a thought.
Well, and now I have to think about possession.
Yeah.
We talk about possessed dolls. Well, now we got possessed robots.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that would be iRobot,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And that movie actually brought up that very first question. What if? Just saying.
Yeah, he gained sentience.
What's that?
The robot in iRobot.
Yeah.
He gained sentience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what made him too human and too dangerous in many people's eyes. So.
Yep. Well, and it's us imparting our distorted humanity on something else. And the next thing I was going to talk about was voodoo and West African traditions. You're talking about that.
I actually have a little mini not haunted voodoo doll that got in New Orleans, and it's up on our display. But of course they sell. A tourist is one of the most gullible and best areas of revenue you can get. And this one came in its own little coffin and everything. It's really kind of cool. But you can tell it's touristy, but hey, it had to buy something. Yeah. I guess it's the intent, and that's what you talk about the robots. The object itself is not evil. Intent activates it, and that's what the whole thing about the voodoo dolls is. You're putting intention into it, and wow, robots and dolls are really not that much different. No, it's now. We didn't think about that before we started this, but really, it's kind of close.
Mr. Asimov was onto something, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yep.
We laugh because we've got Roombas upstairs and down that do our vacuuming. And they basically use a minor form of LiDAR to map your area. I mean, it's not that far a leap. You think about, because I figure, and this is my prediction, one Christmas they're going to come out with the new Baby Alive, and it's going to be a hell of a lot more alive than the last one was. It won't just pee, shit, and eat. This one here may give you your horoscope and everything else, but it may interact. And they've got some they use for kids that are dolls that are more. They got a reset key, and it's part of the health class. I never had to do that. We had eggs. And
I didn't do that at all.
No, and I found out they really can't tell one egg from another because I broke one and made breakfast out of it and then got another one out of the fridge. They really don't pay attention. But anyway, the dolls now, they cry and everything at different times. And I seen some of the kids. We were out somewhere, and one of the girls had one of them. I thought it was a real baby. I mean, it looks like a real baby, and it had the stroller and the pumpkin seat. And so I think at some Christmas, you're going to see a doll.
Yeah.
That'll do a lot of things.
Well, that reminds me, this is kind of off topic, but it's still, have you ever guys remember the Furbies?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
And it would, we got my daughter one for Christmas one year. I ended up burning it in the ceremony, and Michelle participated because the damn thing wouldn't stop, and it started really going off script. So we removed the batteries from it. It still talked.
Oh, God.
It still, and it wasn't like, I don't know if you know how capacitors work.
I had my daughters had the Furbies, but capacitor will store for a while, but only a while.
Oh, only a while. But this thing just kept going without batteries. So we're like,
wow.
Yeah. And that was, Michelle is not a superstitious. She's very religious. Yeah. She took it and she goes, we're going to do a ceremony. We're going to burn this. And we did that. Christmas Day, we took it off.
There was another one, too. I was trying to think what the other one. The other one wasn't, it was a doll-like thing, but you had to feed it. It was more electronic, more digital.
Oh, yeah.
But you had to feed it. Yep. So if you didn't.
Tamagotchi.
Yeah, but I thought I had a different name than that. I think it was that. But she had one of those too, and then she had the bear, not Bernstein, but the other one. I was trying to think of his name. And
Care Bear?
Nope, it was a little saucy on some things it said, not vulgar, but it was a little smart aleck. And she had all those. And I remember one time she stuck that Furby in my room. And I had just started to go to sleep, and its eyes popped open, and it made that little chirpy sound. I said, I have a gun. And it went clink. Yep. And that was it, you know. And I thought, it must be pretty smart. You figure it out. You know?
There is something wrong with this thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't know whatever happened to any of them, but they had them, I think, when they were like, I was 10-ish, somewhere around there. I think is when they had them. But, oh, yeah, remember them well.
No thanks.
Yeah.
Let's see. I was talking about voodoo dolls and Japanese. I guess Japanese had a belief called, I'm going to butcher this, but it's Sukumagami. And
I think you did pretty good.
And it's the idea that objects can develop a spirit after long use.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why, I guess in Japan, dolls aren't thrown away. They're thanked. They're ritually burned. Which
no better way than thank your best friend the doll. Set his ass on fire. That'll do it.
Yep. Yeah. And so, it's this imparting again. I just see this theme over and over, different cultures here.
Yeah.
It's just imparting our spirit, our essence into these dolls. And I think that's, obviously, Chief, you're a long-term student of parapsychology, and I'm new,
mm-hmm.
but it's what is it with these hauntings? We're going to get ready to talk about Annabelle.
Yeah.
And what is it? What do you have any theories on? Like, is it a traumatic event? Is it just long-term use? What is it?
Honestly, I think it's a mix of several things. Now, I always do these lectures, and matter of fact, that reminds me, I sent an email out tonight because I've been asked, when we're starting our lectures up. One of the things I always tell people is when you get attached objects that have attachments, curses, whatever, that 80% of the time that with ghosts, they attach to property. Only about 15% of the time do they attach to objects. Now, that is strictly my own made-up rule. Another 5% they attach to people. And I always follow that up with the line from Larry the Cable Guy that 72.1% of all statistics are made up on the spot. And I made that up. Yeah, but it fits, and it works. And I'll tell you, that 15% of the time, I think what happens is when someone doesn't pass over. Now, this is my own theory. I have no proof of this, but I think when they don't, other than the years I've been in it and seen this, I think what happens is if the property is not something that they want to attach to, and I think they see something that is given to a relative, like a purse, a jewelry box, something like, or a doll, that's the easiest thing for them to become attached to. I think that, and people always ask me, do you think ghosts have to be attached? We have what we call the Beetlejuice theory, which says you can only go so far from the house it's attached to. But yet, I'll tell you on the same extent, numerous years ago, we had one up off of, off one of the drives in town near Meridian Street, North Meridian Street, and Keshler Boulevard. And we had a case up there, and it was of a girl that got hit by a car 4 houses down. But for whatever reason, she attached to the house there. And she traveled 4 houses from the house she lived in. Didn't attach to the house she lived in, but for whatever reason, she attached to that house. So I think sometimes, in Freemasonry, we know that several of the lodges we feel are haunted. And I remember one of the old Masons, I asked one time, I said, why do you think they come here? And he says, well, shit. He says, they've been trying to get away from their wife for years. And he says, they finally found a place she can't find them. And I thought, God, hilarious as that is, it may have some viability to that reasoning. But I do think that what happens is that it depends upon, honestly, it depends upon convenience. It applies to whenever the ghost is able to attach. If it's property that's being passed down, I think that they want that lineage. They want that connection. There has to be a connection for them to attach. So, at the property, either a traumatic death at the property, they lived and owned the property they died at, or the object has been something that was very special to them in life, and they become the desire for it. Okay, take, for instance, jewelry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Certain stones, and we're going to do one on the Hope Diamond. There were some people that were so attached to the wealth of a stone. I'm not talking wedding rings and small items. I'm talking about big stones that they they coveted him so much that I think that desire and that will and that want to possess transcends death. And I think it allows him to attach.
That's interesting because this is going to lead us right into Annabelle.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do you know the history on Annabelle? Whether she was a Raggedy Ann doll, and this was in the 70s, belonged to Donna, which we have no idea if that's her real name. Ed and Lorraine probably
they very well may have changed it. Yeah.
And so that
she was a nursing student.
Yeah, she's a nursing student. Connecticut or New Hampshire, or something like that. That was obviously, I mean, the death and the all the sort of bad mojo that's going on with it. I mean, was that an evil person that owned it, or has that become a possession from?
I think there's
demonic?
2 types of possessions. You have, I prefer to think of ghosts as attachments, not possessions, because it sounds less evil. I guess that's just the reason I use that terminology. And then you have entities that will possess that aren't, they can be elementals all the way to demonic. And I think in this particular case, and I don't say that evil ghosts don't at some point have the advantage of becoming demonic. I just recently, we've been dealing with a case we just got in, and one of the gentlemen asked me, he said, well, and the one thing about demonic is I get a big kick out of this. Do you need a little more cord?
I'm good now.
Okay. The problem with the demonic is everybody has watched way too much TV. And of course, there's a lot of shows out right now. One of my favorite ones was Evil. If you've never seen it, it's a good one to watch. It's 2 seasons, I think. 3, something like that. It has some comical version of it. It's about the Catholic Church in possession, and they put together a team. One's a priest, one's a actual Muslim that they bring in non-practicing, and then they have a psychologist, and it's just really interesting because they bring demons into it in different shapes, and they use the Latin and the Greek history on demons of gluttony to sex demons to possessional demons and so forth, and it's kind of interesting, and it has some comical spin on it too. But one of the things that we see is that there's one that was actually called, matter of fact, it was a special program where they were doing exorcisms, and I can't remember the name of it. So people have been exposed to a lot of this. So a lot of the calls we get on our line start out with, I've got a demonic demon in my home. Really? Have you seen him? Did he mention his name? Possibly. That's really important with demons. And they'll go, well, no, but, I go, okay, well, just tell me in all seriousness, why do you think it's a demon? Well, it won't leave me alone. Oh, shit, I got 3 ex-wives. I think they're demons, but I mean, they have the same traits. You can't jump to that. And I don't ever, I get a lot of people go, well, tell me what makes up it. No, I'm not giving you information that you can suddenly turn to your need. I want you to tell me in the case what exactly is going on. And the first thing the guy says is, I heard scratching in the wall. I said, that's not demonic. That's just a ghost that's annoying. I said, there's a difference.
Or a mouse.
And, then the next thing he told me that he'd, and I don't want to get too far into it because I give the case away, but he had seen shadow figures that he thought maybe had horns. Shadow figures don't form all the way, and they're not really perfect. So it could be horns, could not be horns, but it really, again, nothing really led to the fact it's a demonic possession. And certainly the only thing that he brought up was one item. And again, I don't want all the listeners to get this fed in their head, because I think there is a bit of TV programming that goes on, but they did mention a smell of sulfur. Okay, now that's not uncommon in demonic haunts, but it's also not uncommon in really malicious haunts either. I mean, you do get that occasionally. Odd smells, rotting flesh, that isn't always, and that can also be a mouse in a wall. But, I think that a lot of people immediately jump to that. But in this case, in Annabelle's, I think it was a good jump. I mean, it was I think that was a demonic entity. I think, that's what the Warrens found out very quickly. But you go back to some of the other dolls. No, I think those were people that attached to the doll, and there's several cases of that. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. If not in this, we'll probably do it in the next episode. But, I think that another thing is, if you think about it, that effigy, to look like a person, when you have no form, that's awful tempting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, just a thought. I mean, that's how I would answer that question. I think that most attachments on things come from either possession or the overwhelming desire to possess that and covet that, or the fact that it's convenient. I mean, I think either one of those can apply. So,
because Annabelle, I mean, she lives with her roommate. I don't know. People have probably heard the story to death, but she was a nurse, like you said. She lived with a roommate. She had no occult background, no stated interest in the paranormal. She never went public with her story, then or now. I mean, once the doll was in the Warrens' possession, she disappeared.
Yeah.
But there was no ritual, no superstition, no intent. This doll just started manifesting weird stuff from day one. Well, she's there. There was the parchment paper, messages showing up in different locations.
Being moved. I mean, the funny thing is, whether it's a ghost, a demon, elemental, whatever you want to think it is, they all begin to work their way in. It always begins.
That's true.
Yeah, it begins very small. They'll do little things that won't freak a person immediately. And subtle things, moving. The doll being moved, when there's two people there, the first thought is you come in and go, oh, the roommate must have moved it, and you walk on. Until you get time to get together and switch, and swap stories, you realize neither one of you moved it. And I guess in most people's, you got to think about this. If they got together and said, well, I didn't move it, you didn't move it, and they go, no, what's the next thing you're going to jump to?
It's moving by itself.
Well, I got one before that. Somebody's breaking in the apartment. Somebody has a key to it. They're getting in the apartment while we're gone. You got some real pervs out there. We worked with a young lady on a case south, and she was blind. But she told me she thought she had ghosts haunting the place. And what gave it away was, as I worked with her on this case, she told me that she thought someone had got into her panty drawer. And I said, well, ghosts don't generally do that. I'm not going to say there's not perverted ghosts, but I have not seen any.
Is that something they really did?
Yeah. Well, I told her, I said, and her dad wanted her to call me. I didn't know him, but he'd seen our website. So I got talking to her. I said, I told the father, I said, can you get an Anticam? Can you buy one? He says, yeah. I said, I want to talk to him privately. I said, I want to alarm you, but I think there's somebody in her apartment, and it's not a ghost. Turned out it was the maintenance man. Oh. He was coming in. They caught him on cam with a teddy bear cam. And, we found out that's what was happening. But he was in there with her, and she couldn't see him. And he would move around occasionally. And scary as that was, it ended up not being, and he said, I never dreamed I'd call a paranormal outfit and they'd solve this. And I said, well, if I was a cop, that'd be the first thing I'd do. I'm not a cop. I said, but I'm not an idiot. And I said, it doesn't take much, there's certain things that ghosts do that I'm used to hearing. And when I remember an optometrist one time told me in the Navy, he said, I don't listen to what you say. I only listen for certain letters. If you come up with those, you have a problem and you don't have 20/20 vision. It didn't take me long to memorize those letters. I had 20/20 vision a lot longer than I actually did, but yeah, that was a true story. And that's what I do when I listen to someone telling me, yeah.
So, okay.
So what I do is I listen for them. If they say something like, okay, ghost going through a panty drawer, that's not normal.
Okay.
So I can pick things out that don't make sense. And then we start looking at the human end of it. And, if I was in the apartment, maybe that's just me, I would say if neither one of us moved the doll, dear God, someone's getting in. And, but of course, back then they didn't have nanny cams and, but just a thought. And then the very next thing would be, hey, the doll's moving itself,
So they start having this activity. I never heard the story. Did they investigate whether there was somebody breaking in or not? But I know they had a seance. They brought in some medium. And I think that's what really activated, because you talked about demons. They start a little bit of time. Yeah. Doubt, fear, and self-loathing
is what they love. That's what they feed on.
That. And so I think once you started inviting in and you had the seance,
the seance opens the doors, and a lot of psychics mean well, but they can do a lot of damage, especially if they're not accurate. Someone always asks us why we don't use psychics. Well, I can calibrate just about any piece of equipment we got and tell you if it's working right. A psychic goes off averages. It's no different than betting on craps in Vegas. So you have to look. I mean, it's serious. Yep. You have to determine how many times, they studied 50 cases in the years past. They were accurate 80% of the time. So, 80% of the time, they're going to be dead on unless you hit that 20% when they're not. There's no way to tell. And I don't have a problem with any, because Patty Negri knows me and knows me well, and we're not discussing that story again. Anyway, and I'm very sorry.
Not on
Patty.
air anyway.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. That was a mistake. Stacy Graza, those are all people that know me, and I'm sure they're real good. I'm sure Chip Coffey's very good at what he does. He creeps me out a lot, but he's very good at what he does, and I think he does it on purpose, honestly. But I just don't use them because I can't prove them.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, when they come in and they sit down, they go, oh, you got something here,
Do you think that's putting into the mind and it's manifesting it and it's using your energy to then...
Sure. In psychology, they call it anticipated or expected anticipation. So it's no different than planning a suggestion. Oh, my God, because you're hauling this person, or bringing this person in to help you with everything going on because you're scared, okay? Two girls, young girls living by themselves, they're scared. They don't know what's going on with this doll. They bring them in hoping they will fix all the problems. When people call us, they call us in hopes that we're no different than a plumber or an electrician. We're going to come in and fix the problems, One of the biggest things I always tell people is we don't haul the ghost out. We're not that. It's not like Ghostbusters. We don't take it in a trap when we leave. We just tell you where it's at and if it's actually going in ways to handle either living with it or getting rid of it. And I think that when they called that psychic in their mind was going to fix everything. So when she says, oh, my God, you've got this, they immediately gravitate to that because they're sitting there with anticipated expectations that this woman's going to tell them everything that's going on, And, I can tell you that having been in the intelligence community, there's ways of using subtle information to get around about deductional reasoning to find out things about people. And it looks a lot like magic. It looks a lot like psychics. One thing I worked a lot with was neurologistics programming, NLP. And I tell you what, you'd be surprised at what little bit a person can say to somebody and how much information they can grasp from it. So you get somebody that's really good with it, and there's been a lot of false psychics. I'm not saying this one was, but there's been a lot of false psychics. Harry Houdini loved exposing them. And it doesn't take them much to, I've sat and watched some of these shows. And the one I got, what was the Jamaican psychic? It was on the air.
Oh,
remember her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Miss Cleo.
Yeah, Miss Cleo. How the hell did you not know the federal government was coming for you? If you were a good psychic, it's like any psychic asked me what my name is. Well, shit, you're supposed to know that? And I never will forget. I pulled that one time, I think, on Stacy. She goes, "That's not how it works." And I knew it wasn't, but I want to see how they react. But I mean, come on. You got to look at that in the long term of things. So, when this gal came in, I think she fed into their fears. She did everything that demon wanted her to do.
So do you think, that begs the question, was the doll haunted when it came into Donna's possession, or was it just coincidences that happened that invited the spirit in to attach to it, and then you add the seance and the psychic medium to got these girls amped up, and so all this energy just kept getting invested into the doll. So was this some kind of manifestation post getting the doll, or do you think she was that way from the start?
I think this is just. I think maybe it wasn't fully possessed.
Interesting,
because there's love, like we were talking.
Attachment may not have been very strong.
It may not have been it's not very, so not fully possessed, not very fully attached until the seance.
Okay.
So what he was doing when it was before, it wasn't very strong, so it could only do little things.
So it's kind of like Beetlejuice. It wasn't fully there until you said Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, and then
so it could only do little things like the parchment paper.
Open the door, open the portal. It could only reach through the portal a certain amount.
Okay, interesting. Wow.
I mean, that's an interesting theory. I never thought about when you asked that question. I'm just sitting here running that through my head. Sarah, you want to jump in on this one? Okay, just thought I'd ask.
No, I'm just listening.
That's okay. I have to agree with Heather. I think that, all demons, until you open and invite them in, the old vampire lore was a vampire can't enter your home until you invite them in. I got news for you. Christopher Lee opened all them women's doors and come right in. Didn't seem to have a problem. I don't remember inviting him.
Right through the window.
Yeah, right through the window. So but I do believe that, yes, the Bible is a good key to that. It says we have to let evil in. And I think that, it can only do so much. God.
Like it was testing the waters.
Exactly. Seeing where it can go in at. God protects, and I don't care where you pick God, Allah, whoever you pick. They will protect you unless you invite evil in. You're put on the earth, this is my opinion, and you're given an equal measure of chance. So you shape your destiny. If you choose to go over to the other side, and there's one. I forgot I watched this on the news, and I don't know it to be accurate, but it was something that one of the political parties were doing, and they had the Church of Sin was backing him. That's old Leo or LeVay, his old church, and they were backing him, demonic worshipers. Everybody says, "Oh my God, that's horrible." For some politicians, a vote's a vote. I hate to say it, but it's true. But I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there, but unless you attract them and go, okay. We appreciate the vote and we appreciate the backing, that's letting them in. If you don't, then really they don't have much power. Now, I'm not saying that the Church of Sin has a ton of power. Don't get me wrong. Don't misquote me on these things. But, I think that it has to have an invitation.
It's interesting because, what was his name? Gerald Brittle, who wrote The Demonologist, who chronicled the story and the Warrens. He wrote that the Lou, I guess, one of the things she had on there was help Lou. Mm-hmm. And Lou apparently, after the seance, started experiencing nightmares, chest pains, a scratch on his torso, and it came after the seance. So it was like...
It opened the door.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when you think about that, and that makes it even scarier, I think... When we get in part 2 of Robert the Doll, there's a lot of that with the doll moving. And I mean, that's when it gets creepier in hell. And that's when, one of the best horror flicks, and of course, I'm a big Sif Ghoulie fan. I think, what was it last night? Last night was, I watched it.
The Gorgon.
The Gorgon, yes. It was actually pretty good. I love old B real movies. But they've had several in there. And it's like I've always said before, they do these things with puppets. They do these things with dolls. And there's always, the Puppet Master was a series. I was trying to think of something, Chucky. There's one. So when you watch that and then you go out, it's gonna set that as a suggestible thing in your head. And certainly that doesn't help. But now you're living in a place, you've got two choices. You get rid of the doll and hope she doesn't find her way back. Or you have to learn how to deal with this, because now this is worse than an intruder breaking in. This is someone that lives in the house. Even though it's a doll, it's an inanimate object, it's in the house. And what do you do?
Yeah. So there was the whole thing of Lorraine's with their son-in-law who started taking on tour. Tony. Yeah. I mean, what was all the incidents? Because places burnt down, people had injuries. Was it coincidence, or do you think there was a direct?
Well, this goes back to you're talking about the one from the initial case, right?
Well,
are you talking about the one lately?
You've got the lately when Tony took it on tour.
Well, and first of all, nothing sells tickets like we're taking a haunted doll on tour.
Yes.
That'll do it right there. It's like, and I was lucky. I don't know how much you guys remember this, but when I was a child, I got to see the Ohio Grassman and Ice. They brought this, there was this big case, and it's from the 70s, and this guy supposedly found a frozen Bigfoot, or possibly an Neanderthal. It was in a block of ice. So he encased it, cut it out, and he took it around with a freezer system. And you paid, when I did it, this was when Eastgate was a mall. Okay, so this is going back a little bit. So I'm not young. Matter of fact, this May I turned 60, so the big 6-0. So this goes back a bit. And Eastgate, there wasn't Washington Square and Lafayette Square and all that. No. It was Eastgate, and you had, I can't think of the other one near Broad Ripple. You had it. That's the only two malls you had. And so they had this in the middle of the mall. You paid like $1 or something. You went up on a catwalk that looked down in this freezer. And I'm trying to find my dad's 35 millimeter prints because he was making film. My dad was worse than a Chinese or Japanese tourist. He bought a Yashica camera and documented everything we had in life better than the National Geographic. He had attachments and stuff. Back then, nothing was compact, so you hauled a ton of shit anytime you were taking pictures. He had light bar. He started out with the first movie camera, had to have floodlight light bars. It would raise the temperature of the room 18 degrees every time you turn them on. I mean, it was ungodly, but yeah, he loved doing this, so he's got pictures of it. Okay, so this got to be a big, big issue because later on, the government got interested in it, and the guy got worried because he didn't, they said, well, you could be carrying around an Neanderthal, something that's very important. So he lived in Ohio, had a barn there where he stored it at, had a walk-in reefer they kept it in, and they used they used a truck that would haul actual vaults for burial, and it had a crane that would come off of it. And it's what they used to put the concrete vaults in the grave. So he bought one of those to be able to unload this thing and come in 2 trucks when they traveled around. But they pre-arted it for a long time, and it was called the Man in Wax or the Ohio Grass Man in Wax. But anyway, it had been shot twice. Well, that takes away the Neanderthal part because you don't, unless one of them developed weapons we were unaware of, that wouldn't happen. And it had a gunshot. It had one hand up over its head and another one down low. But the ice was just conveniently, scratched down enough you couldn't get a great view, but it looked awfully human. So when the government wanted to seize it, it disappeared suddenly. And nobody knew what happened to it. Well, then he hired a company, and they didn't find out about it right away, but he got a wax figure made of it and posed as best he could and froze it in a block of ice and then carried it around. Well, when the government came for it, he let them have it. And they opened it up, realized it was wax. But then they did a little research and found out he had just bought that recently and had it done. They found the sales tags, and it was done by, the figure was done by Madame Tussauds. Oh. And so he had hired her to make this figure. And so then they want to know where the real one was at. He goes, well, I don't know. That's the only one I had. It was all fake. And they go, no. We want to see. And they never did find it. And they've been out. Actually, Josh Gates did an expedition one time on the farm property, and they went out trying to find where he might have buried it. Now, of course, the ice would be gone, but the body would still be there, at least the bones. And they were trying very hard to get this, but they never could figure out what happened to it. Mm-hmm. And so it's still around. You'll find if you look up the man in ice in the 70s, Iceman. He was called Ohio Grassman, Iceman, something like that. But it's kind of like that. And I probably got us way off topic. But what I'm saying is when you look at that situation, I've actually forgot where I was going with this comment. But anyway, it was a great story. I hope everybody enjoyed it. We got into crypto there a little bit.
What we're talking about is this coincidence, all the stuff that happened on Tony's tour.
Yeah.
And then, God rest his soul, he passed away. I mean,
no, Tony's still alive.
Oh, Tony is?
Yeah, Tony's he runs Nest Bar. I've talked to him numerous times.
Okay.
We had a situation with a haunted object we had to move, and we had to reach out to him to get advice on how to move it. And
my apologies. Who?
No. Okay. The guy that died was the guy that wrote the book.
Oh, Greg Brittle?
Yeah. And I believe he's the one that passed away. Now, he did it. I've never seen the original case files. Tony has them. They are still there. The Warrens case files are still there, but they don't ever address where the attachment or when the attachment. They got it after the psychic had been through it, and it was in full motion and in full possession. That's when they came in. So, I think Brittle was documenting it as best he could. And there was several people that traveled with the Warrens. A lot of people didn't know this. Of course, Tony was one. But occasionally they would have students that would come in. And they even had a priest that they worked with that the Catholic Church gave them. And that was really odd because during that period of time, Catholicism was not really open to doing, you had to go through the Pope to get an exorcism, and they just didn't do that. But the Warrens did several notable things involving this kind of situation. And one was they got the government to admit to the fact the devil exists. And that's pretty hard to do.
They made a movie about it.
Yeah, several of them. But anyway.
It's called The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yep. And that the judge recognized that the devil existed. And so that was a big plus for them, big plus for the Catholic Church. Probably a big plus for the devil worshipers. Who knew? Everybody won that day. So, yeah, I don't know. What can you expect? But yeah, I think that, one of the things that demons like to use, and I think you see it here, is they predict the future. Lou needs help. And what happens 2 days later? Or a day later, Lou starts having health
scratches,
issues.
heart issues.
So, here it is. I'm gonna do some nasty things to this person. I'm just letting you know up front. So part of that warning sign is the ability to predict something that happens. And that's part of those 4 stages of demonic possession. So I think the doll truthfully still contains, even to this day. Now, you asked me, I tell you why, I don't remember how we got on the Bigfoot subject, but we were going about the recent tour, Annabelle's tour. And, we did a little podcast on it. So many people were asking us about it. And the funny thing is, again, you have pareidolia, you have expected anticipation, you have a lot of things that are going to roll out as a result of that. They marketed that real well. What was it? Annabelle's tour. What was the name of the tour?
Highway to Hell, wasn't it?
No, Devil
on the Run.
Devil on the Run. Yeah, I thought that was a damn good title. I thought, shit, that's good. We gotta make a song on that or something. But yeah, it was pretty good. And of course, what was the first stop she made? Do you remember? Yeah, most people don't.
Was it Northeast?
I think so. But the thing was, the first one, there was no problems.
It wasn't until she went south, right?
It was when she went south. But okay, let's take a look. The worst one, or at least they said, was Louisiana. Okay, so what's the first thing they do? They bring her down to an exposition next to a voodoo practitioner, a voodoo queen who goes apeshit when they arrive. She comes out of her shop, which is right next door to where Annabelle's going to be, and starts telling them how this is not going to work. And you can't do that. You're bringing evil into the world and turning it loose on people. And she drew a great deal of PR. Okay. Now, I'm not getting in the middle of the religious aspirations of this whole thing, but she brought up a lot of stuff. Right after that, the first problem they had these convicts that got loose. My personal opinion is Annabelle did not set the convicts loose. My personal opinion is the jail staff screwed up. If I was the sheriff, I would be looking at my process and procedures. I don't think Annabelle had anything to do with it. I think she was convenient because maybe the sheriff was up for re-election. He didn't want to, hey, Annabelle did it. I was just here. And, I don't know, but I don't buy that one. I'm sorry. That's my personal opinion. Now, Madame Laveau's house. Okay, when you look for things, you've got to make connections. We talked about, okay, so we think it's demonic because why? Well, it said in a paper, Lou needs help, and then it created health conditions. So there's a connection there. Now, she got into it indirectly with a voodoo queen next door, one of the more famous ones in New Orleans. And then Marie Laveau's house burns. Okay, so could there be a connection? I don't think anybody will ever be able to say 100% that she done it, but that's a connection. She wants to get even with the voodoo bitch next door that told her off. What better way to do it? You burn down. That's to them. That's the monarch. That's the pope of voodoo. I mean, Marie, and there was actually 3 Marie Laveau's. A lot of people don't know this. If you go to the gravesite, it's kind of interesting. They've set fires there too, by the way. But it's in cemetery number 1. But I'll tell you, the thing about that is it would be a good way to get even. It would hit them at the heart of voodoo. If you're striking out, just think about it. Okay, what was the next thing that happened? A plantation burnt. Okay, and I can't remember the plantation, but a plantation burned. We'd have to go back through all the notes. And luckily, I've got 3 people that are really fast on that stuff. And I don't remember the plantation, but what's the connection? I don't see any. I really don't see any.
It was the Nottoway
plantation. It was a great plantation. And they said, well, it was because of slavery. I'm sorry, where did that play in at? Because the devil probably wasn't against slavery. I'm just guessing here. But I mean, I don't see how that plays into Annabelle. There's no connection. And then we deal with Dan's death, okay? Dan was not sleeping. I don't mean that in an exotic or intimate way, but he was not sleeping in the same room with the doll. I mean, the doll was back. Annabelle was at its exhibition site. It wasn't, it wasn't in the room with him. if Dan, being a vet like we are, and I think the funniest thing, one of the first videos we ever did, video podcast, I forgot we were on video, and Jennifer brought that up when I drank the sauce out of the Vienna can. I forgot. And I mean, yeah, we eat stuff. I'm betting that he probably had some risk factors. Now, I don't know this. I don't know Dan's family. I don't know Dan's medical records. But I probably think that was a risk factor. Now, and this is something they never did. They came out and said, hey, Dan was in peak health. His doctor said he didn't have any risk factors, no heart problems. Then I'd say, okay, maybe we have something there. But Dan was, I think he was a little younger than I was. I think he was in his 50s, probably closer to Eric's age. And I think that, I honestly think that she didn't have a thing to do with that. Now, do I think she can have things to do with it? Yeah. I think I wouldn't be overly, we were going to go visit her and everybody decided it wasn't worth the hassle. I seen some of the people standing next to the case. No, I don't think that's really a good idea. Those would be one of the shots where I stand about 3 foot in front of the case. You take the picture, make it quick, and I'm out of here. I have no desire to touch the case. That's pushing, the whole thing. And, they showed, of course, if you think about how they marketed this, they marketed it. Tony did with Dan did a case change because they had to maintain one case. And if he did it just the way he told me to handle things, I watched him in the video. He was very precise. But that's great to release right before your next stop because that generates all that interest, And then by the time he got in Chicago, but if you look, there was only a few things that happened, but people went nuts and go, oh my God, Annabelle's killing people left and right. It wasn't like they took a uranium sample and guarded and ran it through a ton of places. That wasn't it. You have to be common sense to a certain thing. A lot of times hauntings, and I always tell people this, and I know you guys have been on enough now and you're starting to be on more of them, haunting investigations, that a lot of times 50% or better you can prove to be something natural. And if you go into it with the fact that everything's paranormal, everything will become paranormal.
True. That's a bias.
Exactly. Okay. So you have to go at it in a way that you're open to what could be. And, I probably the quickest way to make a believer out of somebody is go to sleep and the doll wakes up in bed with you. Yeah, I have some few problems and that'd be a whole lot of notes made. And,
morning.
So that's how I guess I look into it. So I think a lot of and I think they need the money. The Warrens Museum wasn't allowed to open to the public. The city found a way to shut it down because they didn't have parking lot. And they said by ordinance, you can't run a museum without a parking lot. So they knew they couldn't. So it was expensive maintaining two homes. Tony, I don't know what he does all the way for a living. I know he ran a talk show back before they had talk shows, back before YouTube or anything else. You can find these on YouTube. He did one. It was Paranormal to the World, I think it was. But he did it interviewing Ed and Lorraine on 8mm tape. And they're out there now. And they talk about Annabelle and all the cases, and they talk about them and interviewed them right there on the spot. And he did that for quite some time. Do me a favor and look and see what that show was called. Tony Spia. But he did that until their death. And so he was out before YouTube or any of that. And I'll tell you, I think that it's expensive. They didn't, he wrote... the only TV show I actually saw him in was one where they did, God, what was the name? But we actually use it as a training tool. It's actually in our file, and I'll have to look in the Dropbox. But it was they took 4 different teams of paranormal people and put them in 4 different haunted locations. And Tony and I can see the other guy, Brian, I think Brian Cano was the other guy, and they watched from a remote location at different things. And they stayed at these places for 2 days. They were sequestered, 2 days, 3 days, something like that. But anyway, it was like Paranormal Lockdown, but they hosted. That's the only show I've ever seen.
Yeah, so they talks about the 28 Days Haunted.
Yeah, 28 Days Haunted. That's the name of it. So it's 30 days that you're locked down, and they're maintained for another site. But he did a talk show before that. Oh. Does it show? It's, I can't remember. It had a nice catchy phrase, but it, as you get older, the brain only holds so much and you're selective. It was on...
it was Tony?
Yes, Tony is on YouTube, and he interviewed Ed and Lorraine. YouTube has a bunch of them on there with it, but he still runs NESPAR, the group. And I want everybody to understand, he sold the museum, the building itself. He is leased the objects. So the objects do not belong to Ryan, the new owner. They are leased to him, and he is in charge, and as part of their contract, he has to care for them. That includes Annabelle, it includes the Conjuring Mirror, it includes, there's a ton of stuff in there, including...
Haunted Artifacts and Paranormal Investigations. That's the channel.
Okay, and there's one older than that, and it goes back, and you may not, if you don't find it, that's okay. But it was I enjoy watching it because Ed comes out in his leisure suit and gabardine slacks, and of course I love the '60s. I hated gabardine and polyester, but I liked everything else about it. But they come out and they do that. The thing is, I think that tour help raise the money they needed. And, now what's Ryan doing? Well, he's turned it into a bed and breakfast. You can come stay with Annabelle. Oh, yeah. Nope. And
that's what I want to do.
Yeah, the museum's rigged, but the problem is some of the people need to understand. I think my first reality in this kind of thing came when we were at a Paracon and they had the Ouija museum there, and you had to sign a release before they'd let you go in, and it told you all the risk, and most people weren't even paying attention to it. They thought it was a marketing ploy, and some of the stuff there was possibly attached, possibly possessed, and it was sent in, so they wanted people to know about it. There was stuff there. Some of the pochettes were made from human bone with flesh. And so they wanted people to understand there's a risk. There's a risk to the paranormal. There's a risk in what we do. Every time we go out and investigate, if we're not careful, we can drag something home.
Yeah.
So
I did that once. Ugh.
Oh, and I tell you what, you think roaches are bad. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and but I'm just saying, it's all has a risk factor there. I would not want to go stay in a bed and breakfast, but that helped them get the money they needed to, I'm sure it was down in repair. I mean, when you can't bring anybody, what's good is a museum if you can't bring anybody in to see it. And so I think that was part of the tour too. Now, the Conjuring House is something totally different. And so we support Jason Halls, and we donated money to save the Conjuring House. But that's a different situation. Now, I think taking her on tour, the problem is with all that she was responsible for, I would say, even though they traveled with a priest and with all this, they did everything they could. But I was more concerned with some of the locations they took her to. That should have been done at a hall or something where they...
Former prison or something like that?
Yeah, well, yeah. And I mean, some of these locations were already haunted. So the only thing...
Why would you take Annabelle to a former prison?
Well, yeah, but I tell you, one of the funny things was they said activity dropped off. Well, you got to know when you're the biggest, baddest mother in the prison, you all back down. I mean, prison rules, if it's a big guy with a shank, you leave him alone. And
it says the West Virginia State Penitentiary paranormal activity reportedly ceased. Yeah. Contrary to expectations.
Oh my gosh.
There's your key. You have a very active object. Do you really, if the prisoners and these guys, you look at some of the activity they've had there over the years, it's pretty vicious, but when they back down to a Raggedy Ann doll, there's an issue. That's like bringing in a minigun. I mean, my God, this is something they're scared of. If the ghosts are scared of it, there's good reason to be very careful where you put her. And, she could draw on all that psychic energy of all those spirits and make her even more powerful. It'd have been better to take her to a neutral location like convention halls and so forth that they could keep that off. The other, and they did a lot of things, but I see a lot of people getting way too close to the case. And I mean, my theory is you want to take a picture next to her, it's fine, but there should be a 3-foot gap between the case and where your back is at. I've seen people right next to the case. And, that just, there's so many things. Then, of course, there's all the letters. I don't know if you guys read all those or not, but all the people went and saw them and things that happened horribly afterwards. This goes back to the jailbreak. Hey, any good excuse is better than nothing. If I hadn't seen Annabelle, I wouldn't have lost that $600 at the casino last night. I mean, I'd have won otherwise. And I mean, come on. I mean, at some point, you're looking for somebody to blame. At some point, you have to go, hey, that's not her. That's probably me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, now as far as the original possession, I think they didn't know what they had until they got into the situation, and then they realized, oh God, this is a demonic possession. I think, truthfully, my opinion, Aaron and Lorraine thought it was just a haunting attachment. until, because it was just, think about it, just moving around. The worst thing it did was write notes and actually cause some physical harm. But malicious ghosts can do that. And I don't think they thought it was demonic till they got into it.
Yeah, they thought at one point it was a child ghost, and then quickly changed their minds. And it's funny, they never used the word possession. It was but that's really what it was. I mean,
well, it hadn't got that far, because possession usually refers to a person, a human individual.
Okay.
So it was more what they have obsession, which is one of the stages of possession, and that's what this was. It was an obsession that they had taken over the doll, and I think that's where it was at. So, they're very careful to stay with the methodology of the Catholic Church on the 4 phases of possession. And since it wasn't human, it's not really a possession, it's an attachment. And, there's a lot of very evil things that have attachments. There is a voodoo doll, and there is a African, I forgot what the African doll's name is, and it's in the Museum of the Couple. God. Picked a hell of a day to forget my meds. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I can't think of the name. They have their own museum, like John.
The Nykirks?
The Nykirks Museum. They have it in there. Thank you. My wife is my memory. And the worst times when I look at her and she goes, "What?" And I know I'm on my own. And anyway, but
sometimes it's just a look. Like, I'm supposed to know what the look means.
Well, it helps, and helps get me through, because I keep a lot of stuff in my head these days. I'm not getting younger, so I have to watch the memory cells. But any of those objects have possessions. Question is, in John's museum, John Zappa, he has a ton of stuff. We have a couple of objects here at the house. We've got the voodoo hand-carved statue back there, and then we've got the mirror upstairs. Ours are very low impact. We don't have to draw lines of salt around them or keep them under watch more usefully, and we don't. I will say the doll has not left the bookshelf, and I'm hoping it doesn't. I don't think it will, but it doesn't have that kind of energy. These are high-level things to be fooling with. And I mean, you really need to know what you're doing. And I think a lot of people, as a matter of fact, one of the guys asked me that called in on one of the cases, I go to garage sales and stuff, and I bring stuff home. And he says, "That's bad, isn't it?" I go, "Well, if it is, we're in deep shit." I go, "We go to estate sales and Goodwills, and I mean, we love doing that." And but I think the percentage of getting something haunted is probably around 1 or 2% out there. I mean, it's very rare. You think of all the stuff I've hauled in over the years, and I've got one mirror. I bought the other item knowing that it was possibly possessed, but for that matter of fact, you can buy haunted dolls on eBay. Wink, wink. Anyway, for a reasonable amount. I wouldn't hold my breath on how haunted they are, but anyway, the point of the matter is, it's rare. I don't think it happens as often. And it's also been one of the most popular subjects for horror movies. Going clear back to Night Stalker. Night Stalker had one where a table was the devil's table, and it was possessed. I mean, we can talk about a ton of things and a lot of real items that are possessed, but they've used that in Hollywood for years.
Yeah, you said it earlier, Chucky.
Chucky.
Oh man.
Yeah. I really believe that some of my grandkids have picked up his smart ass attitude more than anything else. But I mean, I think he's a horrible little creature, but not just because he kills people. He seems to have a smart mouth. And, I remember my grandson asked me, he says, "Aren't you afraid of Chucky?" I go, "I got a blowtorch." Yeah. I'll send him back to where he came from. But this has been a tool that's been used. So it's something pretty common. There was a lot of stuff. Sandra Brown, the famous psychic, had a doll once that was supposedly possessed, and I won't even begin to tell you how I feel about Sandra Brown. I think she was one of the most fake psychics I ever saw in my life, but she was a psychic to the stars. So, Well, now I've taken us way out of here. Let's get back into the escalation, and we've talked about, how things started going. So why don't you take us through the conclusion a little bit there?
Oh,
how this ends up, not the tour, but how the Warrens end up with it. How do they end their?
I mean, it was an investigation. They took it in their possession. Like I said earlier, there was no child spirit. It was just this entity that, like I said, it was a focal object. And it's the lore. I mean, the lore stands with this, even though, we don't have anything recent of it other than the tour and such. I mean, we had the motorcyclists that came in and mocked it, and then
Yeah, I end up crashing.
Dying in the priest that threw stuff out. You know. So I don't know. I'm terrified of it. I'm terrified of regular dolls. I can't imagine Annabelle.
Yeah. Well, and you know, a lot of dolls are very, you know, my mother has one that my dad gave her when they first got married, and she's 90 as of last month. And this is the ugliest damn doll you ever seen in your life. I don't know where Dad bought it at, but it had to be cheap. And it's a huge doll. It's probably, you know, when you stand it up, it's a good 3 foot tall. And it had automatic opening eyes. Well, over the years, one of those stopped, so it looks like it lost a bar fight. And it has no hair. It's just an ugly ass doll. And she changes the costumes. I don't care what you do other than get in a mask. It's the only thing that would help this doll. But it's creepier and shit. And, you know, my mother says, well, that means a lot to me. And I said, good, it'll be buried with you because it's not staying here. I mean, I'm not taking that thing. I don't care if Dad did buy it. He had a real bad taste in dolls. And I mean, oh, my God. But she said that for she has 3 or 4 Raggedy Ann's. We used to borrow one all the time for display because, you know, and I tried to explain the whole Annabelle thing and she wasn't getting it. So I just gave up. But, you know, I think that the people's either hatred, repulsion, or the fact that they collect dolls and the desire to have dolls will never change. Some people will just love them to death. It's like clowns. Some people are creeped out by clowns. There's a clown motel.
Yes.
Yeah, and you did mention, and we're gonna bring this up in the next segment about the island of dolls, and that's a good one that goes back to something like Annabelle with a little girl's possession. So, you know, I think there's a lot here that are very serious. When you go to the next garage sale and you get ready to pick up that doll, I just want you to think about a few things, you know? So if it tap dances that night, I take it back and donate it again. Anyway, so anybody got anything they'd like to add on that note? I had to end it with something. I mean, it was just too tempting.
Of course you did.
Yeah, it's too tempting. I want to make sure everybody doesn't get sleep tonight. So, well, I want to thank Eric. He went through this and did a lot of the research involved in this, did all the research involved in this. And what I didn't say was I assigned Eric and Sierra both as part of their graduation into full members. They had to create a subject and do a report on that we could use for the podcast. And he did actually 2 parts. So we're going to do another part here shortly. You'll see that. I think it's pretty good. So, and what did I give you?
Oh, the labs.
Oh, yeah. Yep. You see
Haunted labs?
The parapsychology labs.
Yeah, in California. Yeah. In Berkeley, or not Berkeley, it was UCLA. And
I like haunted labs, but
me too.
Yeah, well, it might have been haunted time they got done. That's where the actual on Ghostbusters in the first movie, when they moved them out of the university, was based on the UCLA's parapsychology lab being shut down. But yeah, so I mean, you know, not every doll is haunted. Eric believes that we don't take chances, so don't buy one. Nope. I get that. I mean, when I was growing up, none of my G.I. Joes talked to me unless I pulled the strings. That was always good. And I don't think the little girl I played with down the street, her Barbies, had much to say. And but be that as it may, I think that we've come to the end, and certainly watch for Part 2 of Haunted Dolls. So that's all we have tonight. We wish everybody well. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back with you soon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now time for the Ghost Story of the Day with Heather Lawson.
This comes from A Ghost a Day by Maureen Wood and Ron Kolek. The Screaming Woman, London, England, December 1st, 2009. Filmmaker Peter Jackson has made a number of ghost movies, such as The Frighteners, a movie co-written in 1996 with his wife, Fran Walsh, The Lovely Bones, written by Alice Sebold. When asked by Britain's Channel 4 TV about the spiritual accuracy of The Lovely Bones, he said he couldn't be certain of what a real soul was like. He could, however, tell of his own supernatural encounter. Evidently, 20 years prior, when he lived with his wife across from the Thames Theater, he found out firsthand what a ghostly apparition looked like. One morning, Jackson awoke to the screaming face of a 50-ish looking woman. A dead 50-ish looking woman. Terrified, Jackson watched as her ghostly form glided down the end of his bed and disappeared into the wall. Unsure of what he'd seen, he relayed his experience to Fran, who replied, "Was it the woman with the screaming face?" Fran, it seems, has seen her 2 years earlier. Legend has it that the Thames Theater is haunted. During the vaudeville days, it was said that a woman, after having been booed off stage, committed suicide. She is known to materialize in the theater quite often. Perhaps her visit across the street to Jackson's apartment was due to the reported restoration, or maybe this screaming lady was only in search of an audition.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd., all rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.